Hopefully you all know where you're at tonight, and I'm going to be talking about unconditional love and forgiveness. And some of you said you'd really like to go into it deeper after tonight. And my understanding is, and maybe you can fill in the blank on this, this presentation will be published. As a part of this presentation, when you see the slides, the process that my mentor, Edith Stauffer, gave for unconditional love and forgiveness will be amongst the slides. So you're going to have the process up there that you can look up. And I'm going to ask you guys to do the whole night, starting from right now, to make this a spiritual night for you. And so if you feel that connection with your higher self, your spiritual self, your inner self, your heart chakra, if you could tune into that during my presentation and during the demonstration that's going to follow, because a group of people gathered together absolutely form a container for spiritual energy. You are that container, if that makes sense to you. And you probably wouldn't be here if it didn't make sense to you at some level. And so form that container, be in your heart, and put that energy out. As I was driving over here, as I got about to that Siskiyou Pass portion of reality, there was a big rainbow across the sky. And then on the radio, I'm not kidding, and over the radio came, "What the world needs now is love, sweet love." I think it was all divinely destined for tonight. So, unconditional love and forgiveness. And now I've been asked to entertain questions at the end of the lecture portion and not during the actual lecture. So think of them or write them down or whatever you want to know. Anything and everything is fair game as far as I'm concerned, okay? But we'll save questions until the end. Well, I think we'll do that before the demonstration, and then we'll do the demonstration. I'm very informal. You can probably tell if you need to run and go to the bathroom, whatever, just do it. Fine with me, no problem at all. Unconditional love and forgiveness. You're going to learn a little bit. Have some of you or many of you heard about the Essenes? Know something about a number of people raise their hands. I'm told to, yeah, another one over there. Okay. Edith Stauffer, who was my teacher, you're going to hear all about her in a minute. She attained this knowledge from a teacher who derived it from the Essenes. And so it has a very old foundation, a couple of thousand years old. And the Essenes, as you probably know, Jesus most certainly didn't speak King James English. And he wasn't even speaking Hebrew. He wasn't speaking Greek. He spoke in Aramaic. And so the Essenes also derived their teaching, put it out there in Aramaic. So that's just kind of deep source where this material is coming from. Edith Stauffer, my teacher, and I'm going to tell you more about her. Eventually, after studying with a fellow you're going to hear about in a minute, she put out a book, Unconditional Love and Forgiveness. If you're lucky enough to get a copy of that, hold on to it. It's totally out of print. It sells for a lot of money used. I've got one over there. Please don't take it. And so Edith eventually put this book out. It is available in some libraries, and occasionally you'll see a used copy out there, but they're very hard to get a hold of. So that's Edith. She was my psychosynthesis teacher. Edith was a most amazing woman. And she was my mentor, and she lived until her mid-90s, and she taught unconditional love and forgiveness. She started teaching it in her 70s and went all the way up into her 90s, touring the world and going to hot spots in the world, places where there was civil war and all kinds of awful things were going on, teaching people the technique of unconditional love and forgiveness right up into her 90s. So she was an amazing lady. And rather than reading this, just take a minute. Can you see in the back row? I was scared I was going to make it too small. So tune in a little bit, look at what I've written up there. That'll give you a sense about Edith. Edith was a very rare woman in many ways. I asked her what one of her first childhood memories was. It's not on the slide, but she was raised in Kansas. And she was raised on a farm out of town. Well, it so happens that her father got sick one night, and Mom said, "You got to go get the doctor." Edith jumped on a horse. She was a child. She rode the horse bareback all the way into town, fetched the doctor, and brought the doctor back to the farm. And I said to Edith once upon a time, Edith, weren't you afraid? And she said, no, I was never afraid of anything. So she had a rare constitution where the will and strength and the power of her very dynamic got her through almost every kind of situation. She literally didn't know much about fear. That wasn't her lesson in life, she told me, was to learn love. She had to learn about love and learn about forgiveness because she had such a powerful will. And Psychosynthesis talks a lot about the will. In fact, one of the books over there, The Act of Will by Roberto Azzioli. Psychosynthesis is one of the very rare psychologies that teaches how to develop the will as a very important part of our constitution, is the power to get things done and to go through things. And Psychosynthesis teaches about how to develop the will. There's very few psychologies that I know anything about that have to do with the will. Are there any psychologists or counselors in the audience tonight, by the way? One right there, okay. One and one way back there. We have two. And so I'll be teaching some things hopefully you can use in your practices as we go along. And for those of you who are not, that's just fine too. But, okay, so that's Edith. Edith was also extraordinarily intuitive. And I've seen her on many occasions just kind of know things that she shouldn't know, which is quite a gift in psychotherapy. A little bit of a challenge for folks in psychotherapy to have a therapist that actually seems to be able to tune into a whole other level of knowledge about things, and it would guide her work. And Psychosynthesis has a huge amount of guided imagery, and Edith would tune into the will, she would tune into the intuition and use it doing psychotherapy, which is a very powerful technique. Edith inherits unconditional love and forgiveness. Again, I'll get out of your way so you can see. Can you see back there? Okay, and if you want to move up, feel free to do so. With your mask. Okay, good. Okay. So I want you to be able to see though. You're welcome. Okay. So you guys read through what I wrote. By Dan McDougall. So McDougall's gig, which was really, really important, McDougall went into the prisons and taught prisoners unconditional love and forgiveness. And the effect was extraordinary. You guys probably, do you know the word recidivism? You know, who goes back and who doesn't go back? Amongst those who he taught unconditional love and forgiveness, the recidivism rate was very, very low. They didn't have to go back, because it seemed like a great deal of what was going on with the people in prison was they were toting around a whole lot of unforgiveness and anger with people. So McDougall specialized in prisoners and teaching the unconditional love and forgiveness. So that was pretty amazing. And Edith learned from him the techniques and studied with him. Okay. And a very brief overview. Read, and then I'm going to add a little more to it. So, about psychosynthesis. How many of you previous to tonight heard about or know about psychosynthesis? Yay! Okay, one, and you do too. Okay, psychologist and one other. Good. Psychosynthesis is one of the, if not the original, transpersonal psychology. Transpersonal meaning beyond the personality psychology. And the other one would be Carl Jung's analysis, but the other one would be Roberto Azzioli's work. Okay. What psychosynthesis does, it's very unusual. I can't remember if I did it on the next slide or not. Nope, I'm going to go back. What psychosynthesis does, it's rather unusual. It has two levels of intervention in psychosynthesis. The one level is to work on the personality, and that's the stuff that normal psychotherapies and counseling do. The blockages, the leftover stuff from childhood, which we all have, if we're being honest. We've all got the issues. There's nobody that doesn't, at least that I deal with. So it would work with people in a rather conventional way to remove the blockages to their growth and development in the personality level. Even some people that would be classified as fairly seriously mentally ill they would work with. But as a second stage, I'm going to say this as carefully as I can, but going on concurrently, working at making contact with the higher self, aka the soul, and bringing in, bringing down, bringing through the energy of the higher self to help with the removing of those blockages, and also to bring in your individual intuition and the capacity to move forward in life, decide what you need to do in life, and to figure out what to do. As I've already mentioned, a tool very heavily used in psychosynthesis is guided imagery work. It has the capacity to tune into deeper levels of the self, of the unconscious, and bring down and in the higher self to work with the images that are brought up in the imagery work. To actually work with those images, to transform the images, to change the images. If you hear something different than ordinary psychotherapy, yeah, you're getting it right. That's what it does, and that's how it works. And we'll come back to this. Edith Stauffer, my teacher, went and studied with the I'll say it in the Italian way, Aszioli. I like the way that sounds, Aszioli. She went and trained with the Aszioli in Italy, and then brought that knowledge back to the USA. She was a lifelong student. Have any of you, I'll ask for a show of hands, so you can't see it with the camera, have any of you been exposed to the Alice Bailey material, the so-called blue books? Oh, several of you have. Yay, team. Roberto Aszioli was the secretary of the Arcane School in Italy. That's his background. And so Edith also was a student, a lifelong student of the so-called blue books, the works of Roberto Aszioli, and the one that's called Jwakul or Jwalakula, also called the Tibetan. So she was a very deep student of that tradition. If you want to start with a book, in fact, there was one over here somewhere, but anyway, the latest version of this, and I'll do a show and tell here. Okay, and I'll hold it up for the camera so you can see it there. Okay. This is still available. It's in print. It's out there. You can get it from Amazon or virtually anywhere. This is the older version of this, but this is it. This is a psychosynthesis book. It's a little bit of a difficult book, but it's the one to start with. It's the one that you want to go with. So, with that. Okay. Now, like you said, you can get it most anywhere. A little story. This to kind of get us into the Unconditional Love and Forgiveness work. I had studied with Edith at the High Point Foundation, which she founded in Pasadena, California. And I'd studied with her for about 2 or 3 years there in the High Point Foundation. Then I moved back to Minnesota, worked on my doctorate at Ball State University in Muncie, and then took a job with the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota. And while I was there, Edith put on a workshop, a 2-day training workshop in California, in Los Angeles area. And I went to that 2-day workshop. And Edith would oftentimes do a demonstration of unconditional love and forgiveness in her workshops, or more than one during the course of a day. And so she got a volunteer from the audience who came up at the end of the day and the first day of the training. And there was a woman and she lived in Los Angeles. Her issue that she wanted to work on was, hold your breath, her stepfather had tried to kill her as a child by poisoning her. And she'd been toting that around for much of a lifetime. She's probably in her 30s or 40s at that point, and realized that she had to forgive him. That's a biggie. I think most of you would agree that's it's pretty big. Okay, so Edith did the training. There was hardly a dry eye in the house during the process. Probably 50 or 60 therapists in the crowd watching. The next morning, Edith had the habit of saying, did either of you have any significant dreams or anything you'd like to share with our group? So it's the next morning, day 2, and the woman stands up and said, yes, there's something I'd like to share. She said, I did the work, and then she said, I haven't talked to my stepdad in 20 or 30 years. The guy that tried to kill her. She said, he called me last night. He said, something changed. What happened? So she had to explain to him. Forgiveness knows no distance. Stepdad lived in New York City. She lived in Los Angeles. It didn't make any difference. The transpersonal work, the spiritual work, doesn't know distance. It can be around the world. It can be anywhere. Does that make sense to you? You know, and I know you know this if you've been studying in metaphysics. It's an interconnected whole. We're all one at the higher level. Maybe not the personality level so much, but the higher level, we're all one. You tune into that, and the work changes. It becomes different. Edith had the way of bringing down that energy, and that energy went out across the country overnight, within minutes, and the stepdad responded and said something changed. How about that? True story. Okay. The process of forgiveness, I'm going to have you take a little, I wish you could see a little better. Okay. These are initial steps, and there's several steps, so let's go through it. Number one, say to yourself, I choose to stop punishing myself and feeling bad for what Joe, Jane, whoever has done or is doing. That is very important. The will energy of choosing to forgive. That's the bringing in the will, okay? I choose to stop. Isn't that interesting language? I choose to stop punishing myself because unforgiveness is a self-punishment. Isn't that rather amazing? What a thought. It's a self-punishment when you don't forgive. It has done or is doing. The last time I did this with a student, she wanted to forgive her ex-husband. And she'd gotten a divorce, and she couldn't get over the stuff that he had done that caused the divorce. And it was very moving. It was very profoundly moving. And again, the rest of the students formed that container of spiritual energy for the work to occur. And I've seen her many times since on campus when I worked at Pasteur. She'd always stop and say, thank you so much. Everything changed. My attitude changed. My relationship changed, even though he's my ex. You know, by the way, Edith would always say, and this is important for all of us, and including the therapist, never ever ask anybody to forget. We can't. The memory's there. It starts to fade as the distance becomes more. You're not asking to forget. You're saying to forgive. That's a different thing. That's the emotional charge of the negativity that we're carrying around for that other person. But don't say forget it. They can't. Never can. So, all right. Number two, imagine that person you need to forgive is in front of you. And if you're doing this at home, literally use an empty chair. Literally. And later, we'll work and maybe we use an empty chair and we do it a little later. But to use an empty chair, to visualize them sitting in that chair as vividly as you possibly can. Does that make sense? As if they're actually sitting there. You see them sitting there in front of you. By the way, even if they've crossed over to the other side, that's okay. You can still visualize them sitting there in whatever way you think you should remember them. Okay? You may wish to close your eyes when you do this. As you hold the image of the person in front of you, say aloud. It's very important that you verbalize these things, get it out. I would have preferred that you did or did. I would prefer that you, whatever it is you would have preferred they did. I'd have preferred you didn't take up with that other woman, you dirty louse, but you did, and that's the way it is. I would have preferred that you didn't give me a bad performance review that really screwed me up. I would have preferred, do you get the idea? So literally say it out, what you would have preferred of them that they had done, that you be nice and not such a jerk, or whatever it is that they did. Number three, say, but you didn't do that, so I will now release this incident. I choose to let go and be free. Very important. Do you see the will activity in this? I choose to, that's the will. I choose to let go of this. I choose to, and Edith would always say, I choose to cancel. That's the next line. Therefore, would you hold this for 1 second for me? I'll leave my hands free for just a moment. And Edith would do this gesture. I choose to cancel. I choose to cancel. It's a cutting kind of emotion. I choose to cancel my demand that you be different than you were, that you act differently than you did. I cancel it. Very important. It gives it, I can't describe it, it puts an energy behind it, the cancellation. So, thank you, my dear. Thank you. Okay, bless you. And number 4, therefore, I cancel all demands and expectations and conditions that you do or say or be different. An important piece of this is, okay, we want people to be different. You've all been offended by somebody. You've all been through the breakup. If you get old enough, the divorce. It's inevitable almost, you know? Okay. And we wished that they'd have been different. Guess what? They weren't. They probably still aren't. Okay? So it's kind of getting to the point of, I wish they were different. I'm demanding something of them that they couldn't be or do. Do you see that? I cancel my demand that they be different than they actually were or are. Has a certain logic, doesn't it? You know, they are who they are. They were who they were. And I cancel my expectation because it's hurting me. It isn't hurting them, it's hurting me. But I expect this out of them. Okay. You are totally responsible for your actions, whoever they are. Okay, I release you to your own good. I'm not going to tote it around. A lot of people, you know, I'm old enough that a lot of my clients and my friends have been through the divorce. There are 1 or 2 or 3 of them, okay? And the people that they're still tied to them. I don't know if have you ever done any work? You guys know when I say courting, the work of courting? Okay, it comes from the kahunas. Over in Hawaii, they talked about courting. It means that even the people that your ex, whoever name your ex, whatever your ex is, you still have this cord going out toward them and to them for whatever the hell they did to you back in the day. And part of this is to break the cord. I am no longer responsible for you. Hey, you're on your own. You're responsible for yourself. I can't be responsible for you. It's the letting go, it's the cutting of the cord is really what it is in so many ways, if that makes sense to you. Here we go. Step 5, close your eyes and raise is very, very, very important. Raise your consciousness into the higher self. Edith used the word nafsha. I don't use the term because I don't use the Aramaic terms. I figure the English terms work just fine, so I use higher self. She would use the Aramaic term, which was nafsha. And I'm going to give you, in this side presentation, I'm going to give you a list of some of the Aramaic terms and other terms that Edith would tend to use. So to raise yourself, if you're, I know you can't see this on the camera, how many of you are meditators? Almost everybody in this room. Isn't that delightful? Okay. If you know how to within yourself, I was trained in using the heart energy, the anahata. So I raised the energy up the spine and through the top of my head, making connection with what's called the soul star. And that is a star above your head that for many people is a place of connecting. So you can connect in the heart, you can connect through the ajna center. If you use that center, you can go through the crown. And you can raise the energy to the soul star, which is above you. Any of that will do, whatever's comfortable for you. But the issue is you're going to try and raise your energy to the highest vibration that you can. Whatever for you is that high vibration. Stay inside, eyes closed, until you can raise it to that level of energy, as much as you possibly can. Okay? Imagine the love of the nafsha has for you to feel love all around you. If you're a visualizer, I'm a very visual kind of guy. I envision the golden light emanating from my heart. One of my first experiences in college work, and I worked in colleges for 20 some odd years in counseling centers. I was sitting with a woman doing guided imagery one day, and we were doing some work with her grandmother who had passed, and I was visualizing golden energy emitting from my heart and going to her to surround this woman as she worked with her grandmother. I'm not kidding, this is true. This didn't happen very often. When she opened her eyes at the end of our work together, she went like this, and she said, "Oh my God," she said, "this entire room is filled with golden light, and it's all pouring out of your chest." Yeah. And so it's what we think is a guided imagery sometimes, and working with energy is a real McCoy. It really happens. It does happen. I've had other incidents where people felt the emanation of energy. Now, I had been meditating for many years to that point. I wasn't my first rodeo, but the idea of connecting with the heart chakra, with connecting with golden light, or the silver light above your head, if you want to, whatever works for you, and then bringing that energy down so you can work with that energy, because that's what you're doing in this work, okay? Feel the positive quality of the higher self. The more you can feel it all around you, the love energy, the better off this whole work is going to be. Does that make sense to you when I put it out to you? Okay. Number 6, with your eyes still closed, continue to feel the love of the nafsha, the higher self. Now say to the person that you're forgiving, "I send you this love from the nafsha," or you can say higher self if you want, it doesn't matter, to you just as you are, or just as you have been, not as you want them to be. You get the difference? Send it to them just the way they are, whatever that is. And even if they screwed you over, even if they did bad things, and they may have, we've all had those experiences, you're sending love to them in an unconditional way, okay? You, who are doing the work, feel this love flowing out from you to this person. Take your time and really feel it. And what Edith would sometimes do, often do, should repeat it if it wasn't felt the first time. Should repeat this, connecting with the higher self, bringing through the energy of love, and sending it out and repeating the affirmation, if you will. I send this to you just the way you are. I send it out to you just the way they are. Does that make sense to folks? Okay. So this is the process. This is going to, my understanding is this is going to go out in the website. Welcome, come on in. It's going to go out to the website, and you'll be able to pick it up off the website to use for yourself. Okay? All right. And here we go. Oh, number 7. Now be aware, I'm sorry, I skipped a step here. Last step. Now be aware of your body and how it feels. Okay? See if you're holding any demands on that person in any way. So this is kind of sitting there. Did I really let go of it? Did I really let go of it? Okay? If you did not feel the release, repeat the process. And that's what I was saying about the repeated process. Repeat the process. Okay? And repeat it for each action that you want them to let go of, or you want to let go of. Each action. The time that you did this, when you did that, I wish you woulda. Okay, for each of the actions to repeat it over again. Okay, treat them separately. Always examine your willingness to be free. Sounds funny, doesn't it? You would think if you came to the process you want to be free. Not necessarily. You could be holding a whole lot of resentment and anger, and that cording that I talked about with the other person, some cords that need to be cut once and for all. Okay. If you don't feel it, you need to repeat it over again. And you may need to say to yourself, or if you're being guided by somebody, and for the therapist, you can see how the therapist guiding would be very helpful. Is something else blocking you? Is something else blocking you? Okay? And it usually comes up immediately, what is blocking. You'll see it. If it doesn't come up, feel deep gratitude for the higher self, the nafsha, and you can send it out as to the forgiven one. Sense the relief and it will come, the release and it will come. It's a feeling. It's a deep and profound feeling. And it will be in your heart and it'll be all around you as energy. You will feel it. And you feel the sense of release. It's not coming from the personality. It's coming from the soul, the higher self. This is soul work. This is not personality work. So if it's done correctly, there's a descent and there's a sending out, okay? This exercise can be done often. It works for in small hurts and disappointments. It works for deep emotional trauma. It works anytime that we feel our love is blocked to the other person. Like I said, Edith was going around the world into war zones and places where horrible things had, from one human being to another, doing the unconditional love and forgiveness work with people who you'd think would not be able to forgive, because as I told you the story about the woman that was poisoned by her stepdad, it can work. It can work at a distance. And it can work from 20 years ago as well as it works today. So does that make sense to you guys? Okay. I'm going to go for it a little bit. I'll have you read through this. Edith also used self-forgiveness. This is really good work that people can do. Some of us have an easier time forgiving somebody else and a harder time forgiving ourselves. All the mistakes we've made, I'm one of them. I'm going to tell you a story. It's not on the slides here. My first ever real big experience with psychosynthesis. I'll move over. You don't have to move the camera over. I decided to go back to school, and I had just discovered the Psychosynthesis book at a bookstore up in Vancouver, British Columbia, at the Bodhi Tree Books up there up in Vancouver. And so I discovered the Psychosynthesis book. I decided I was going to go back to school in Los Angeles, and I was going to get my master's degree from Pepperdine University in psychology. And so I'm sitting on the plane, and I am reading the Psychosynthesis book. And the darndest thing happened, totally unplanned. It's as if we were flying at 30,000 feet over the Cascades on the way to Los Angeles. And somehow I rose above myself. That's all I can say. I rose higher than myself. I saw, they talk about the near-death experience, that you see your life pass in front of you in panoramic fashion. Maybe some of you have heard about that, your life. Yeah. And so it happens frequently, and people they come back from having had a near-death experience. So I'll have this. That's what happened, but it wasn't a near-death. I saw my life. I saw the jobs I had had. I saw the women that I loved. I saw the places I'd lived. It all passed in front of the mind's eye, with no emotion connected with it whatsoever. And then what I felt was tremendous love for the whole thing. Every darn bit of it. All the mistakes I'd made, all the stuff I'd done wrong, everything. And what was inside of me was a sense that it was all the stuff that you need for learning. Even all the mistakes were for learning purposes. And that sense of love and compassion, that's the higher self. That isn't the personality. It still stays with me sometimes. I'll still visualize it, and I'll come back to that. That's what this nafsha business is all about. That's what the higher self's capacity to love and forgive is all about. There's really no mistake you could ever make that the higher self can't forgive. Isn't that interesting? It's just all learning. Yeah, and maybe you got to come back and repeat it. Yeah, that's true. That's another lecture. All right, here we go. Last. So again, you can do the whole exercise for yourself. It doesn't have to be something. This is for therapists. You can teach your clients to do it for themselves too. And you in the audience, you're going to be able to see this online if you're interested in doing it. I didn't make copies because you're going to get it online. So, okay? Got it?
No, wait.
I can't hear.
Wait, you need to take photos.
Oh, okay. I'm happy to have you take photos. Just, if you get me, make me look slimmer. Okay. All right, got it? Okay, there we go. Some terms. I'm not going to read through these. You just quickly look, okay? And these, again, they're going to be online. So, yep, okay. We'll say it again at the end for people that came in. Yeah, okay, all right. Someone should be able to get this stuff. Yeah, these are just a few of the terms that Edith put out. Most of them were learned from the Essene teachings. Okay. All right. You can go through the nafsha, the soul, the higher self. This one's important, the Rachmani, okay, which has to do with love expressed without unconditional love, express love without demanding anything from the other person. Yeah, it is agape. It is. Thank you. It is. Okay. Yeah. The sin, some of you raised in the Christian tradition know this already. The word sin literally in the Greek means missing the target. It's an archery term. That's literally what it means. Sin is to miss the target. So that doesn't sound so bad. Just, yeah, hey, next time we'll hit it. Or we'll get closer to it, perhaps. You know? All right. All right. Once you start tuning into the unconditional love, you'll find that you, you can bring it up and bring it in at will. Okay? It's something you'll be able to do. Now, I showed you Edith's book, which was the Unconditional Love and Forgiveness. Mary Hayes Greco was one of her students, and she's got an institute in Minnesota. Really nice lady. This book is available and is available at a reasonable price. $16 in the U.S. You can buy it at Amazon. So, she teaches the same techniques. She learned them from Edith. And she does workshops there in Minnesota if you wanted to go back and do a workshop there in Minnesota. So, okay. All right. Now, just so you know, and I didn't know this until I did some research a few years ago, there is, in fact, an unconditional, or a global forgiveness day, I should say, and it's celebrated each year, and these are the years and the dates that if you wanted to tune into a worldwide forgiveness day. So, and after recent events that we're all aware of in the world, there may be a lot of forgiveness that we're going to need to do, and maybe even certain dictators and other people that we may want to do some. That's hard to think about. I think about that often, about that need to forgive and not be angry about everything. A really important, really good, and you may, if you got something to write, you may want to write this one down so you can look it up before this gets published. The Psychosynthesis Center in the Berkshires, and I've studied there several workshops. They have a website called synthesiscenter.org. Synthesiscenter.org. All of the major articles that were done about psychosynthesis, and many by Azzioli, are available for free. They're absolutely free. You can download them, print them out, read them, study them, and so on. They also have a wonderful training program there. You don't have to be a therapist to go to their training. They do have some of their trainings that are for therapists. But, so that's the gig. That's the gig. And that's me. And you're very welcome to, that's not actually me, that's an email. But anyway, this is me and that's it. Yeah, okay. So, and you're welcome to send an email to me. I'm very happy to respond to emails. So I choose to do this rather than the telephone. That's just that's the way I tend to roll. So then I can take my time in responding and so on. So, all right, now what I would like to do is, let's first of all, we said we would hold questions to the end of this portion, this section. And so, questions about anything you want to know. So I'm here for that. Anything that came up for you today or whatever. I'm going to sit down for a minute while you do it. Now you have to put the camera down. Okay, here we go. Okay, all right, go for it.
So, on part 4, step 4,
Yeah.
there's a, there was a blank, and you used the word different. I cancel all demands, expectations, and conditions, do or say or be. I didn't quite understand the wording there. And what
Yep,
goes
sure,
in the
sure,
blank.
sure. Let's just think for a minute. Maybe there's somebody that you need to do some forgiveness with. And you have in your mind the desire that they had done something different than the way they did it. And so the notion is that you go back to what it is you wish they'd have done differently and how they wish you would have done differently. I wish you'd have acted different. I wish you'd have said something different. I wish you hadn't did this to me, da 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 da. Do that.
I understand that. I just don't understand what goes in the blank other than different.
Let me go back to it. Let me see if I can find it.
There seemed to be a word missing, maybe.
Okay, it could be. I've been known to do that at times. That's happened. It's in self-forgiveness. Step 4 is right there. Therefore, I cancel all demands, expectations, and conditions that do, say, or be blank in the past or now. That's the same idea. That's what's meant there. In other words, that they should have done, would have done, could have done, might have done in the past or in the present moment. That's the idea there. I probably typed that wrong when I did it. So
So
Change.
maybe the word you is supposed to be in there, expectations
could be.
and conditions that you do or did? Okay.
That makes sense, doesn't it?
That makes more sense.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. Clarifies. Oh, thank you. What else? What else? You're smiling. I like your smile. Okay. Please go for it. Go for it.
The guided imagery
Yep.
used for the
Yep.
psychosynthesis.
Yep.
Is there a place you can access that guided imagery? And
I'm going to answer that in 2 different ways. Forgive me for the use of the word I'm going to use. Psychosynthesis uses a lot of what I call canned images. And that's where you literally go to a script. And I'll tell you a story in a moment. I'm big on stories. We've been doing therapy for 40 years. I got a lot of stories inside of me. But anyway, it uses a lot of canned images and takes a person on a guided journey of some kind. If you go to the website I gave you, there's a number of them there that Assagioli gave. I changed my technique for doing imagery a number of years ago. It happened because a woman came into my office one day, about a 27-year-old recent college graduate, and she said, "I hear that you do guided imagery." I said, "Yeah." And she said, "I'd love to experience that." And so we made a date for her to come back at the end of my normal work day, and she was going to come in after the end of her work day, and we were going to do a guided imagery session. And I decided what I was going to do in advance. I was going to do an imagery where, first of all, we did relaxation with her, and then we had her go through a meadow, and then from the meadow, she was going to go up a mountain. We were going to go to a temple at the top of the mountain. I hear the temple now. And we were going to consult with her higher self up the mountain. Isn't that delicious and wonderful and fun? So she came in. I got as far as we're going to walk through the meadow. And she said to me, "But how about the junkyard?" The junkyard. And I said, "What junkyard?" And she's the one that's right behind us. "Oh, sounds like you need to go to the junkyard." So everything changed in that moment. We went to the junkyard. We got there, and the gate was locked at the junkyard. And there was a barking junk house dog. No junkyard would be complete with a junkyard dog. So I worked with her in the imagery. Let's see if there's somebody who can help us. Sure enough, a watchman came out. He restrained the dog, and he opened the gate, and he led us into the junkyard. Cool. Is there anything that attracts your attention in the junkyard? Well, yeah, there's an old 5-gallon paint can over there. Do you think you need to go to there? Yeah, let's go there. So we went over, and it had the top, throwing away junkyard 5-gallon paint can. Is there any way of getting the top off? Well, there's an old screwdriver over here. Well, let's use that. So she popped open the can of paint. Inside was a reflective, you know what mercury looks like, the reflective surface of mercury, okay? It was a can filled with mercury. If you know anything about alchemical symbols, it's an alchemical symbol. But anyway, that's another story. We didn't get into that. I said, I want you to peer into the mercury. And so she did. And I said, what do you see? I see a scene from my childhood. Let's go there. So we went there. And instantaneously, through the power of imagery and imagination, we were there. She was a young teenager, an older child, and she was sitting in a tree and she was crying. She was really crying. What are you crying about, honey? Oh, my mother. She just doesn't understand me. She never listens to me, and she doesn't understand me at all. I'm through with her. I don't care anymore. Pretty bad. She had graduated from a Christian college, and I knew that, and in the Midwest. And so I said, is there a guardian or a guide that you could ask to come and join us sitting on this branch of the tree together? I was sitting next to her on the branch of the tree, you see. I'm imaging it as I do this. I'm literally seeing it in my mind's eye and imaging it. And she said, well, Jesus. I said, okay, that's great with me. I believe in Jesus, so let's do that. So she invoked Jesus to come and sit on the branch with her. And I said, is there anything Jesus would like to tell you? And she said, yes. Jesus said, I've got to forgive my mom. And so I said, okay, what would Jesus like you to do? He wants me to go back to the farm, and the farm was in upstate Minnesota. Go back to the farm and meet with my mother and tell her that I forgive her. And so what I'm about to tell you is absolutely true. So we concluded it. We saluted Jesus. We returned to the junkyard. We returned to the present moment. Okay? Me not so much leading the imagery, but cooperating with it. It came from her. The junkyard was her junkyard. Jesus was her guide. I just cooperated with the process. In a lot of years of therapy, I had a sense of what to do next and how to do it, I guess. And then I'll try not to cry with this. She came back about 3 weeks later and she said, that was really important. And I said, why? And she said, I learned I'm pregnant with my first child. That's another kind of imagery, by the way. And I spent 3 years kind of learning to do that imagery. After that, I went and, kind of learned how to do that, the style of imagery that doesn't try and make it a canned imagery. It takes what comes out of the person as what you need to work on, whatever it is. But to start every session deciding what they want to work on and how they want to do it. Does that make sense to people when I say that? It's a different way. It's called interactive, for you therapists, to interactive guided imagery. Interactive guided imagery. It's a 3-year training program that you can get involved in. So it isn't. I know that was a long answer, but.
No, that was amazing. That was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Anything else from you guys? Yeah, go.
So, when you ended the story about the woman and her mother,
Yes.
you said it was very important. I thought, because her mom got a diagnosis and she was going to die.
Yeah.
No, you said because she was pregnant. And then it made me think, because if she didn't forgive her mom, she would carry this unforgiveness and it would somehow go to the child.
I think that's true. That wasn't what I meant, but I think that's absolutely true. You know, there's a lot of evidence that children are kind of baptized with whatever energy the parents are carrying around with them. You know, there's an amazing study at UCLA where a Hispanic woman that did not speak English she was hooked up to a heart monitor. She was carrying a baby. One of the nurses in English made some disparaging remark about Hispanics. Okay, the heart monitor went wild. When the woman made the disparaging remark about Hispanics, this woman didn't speak English. She got the energy, though. It's all energy, for God's sakes. It's all energy. So you're quite right. What I was meaning, though, and what this woman meant, she needed her mom. She needed her mom. She needed to regain that relationship with her mom. And to do that, she had to go back on a vow she'd made. She wasn't going to have anything more to do with her mom because she was such a bad mom. Not really, but in her mind as a little kid. So, yeah. Anything else? Go.
I'm just curious about, like, I have breakthrough after breakthrough, but then there's a disconnect with integration.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, like,
Yep.
you know, is this something that you think,
Ask, can you do imagery? Are you
yeah,
adept enough to do? Okay, good. I say that because some people have no idea even what that is, but go to your higher self, get in that subjective meditative state. Ask for what your higher self process would be for integration. Ask what Edith would call the nafsha. I call the higher self or the soul. What do I need to do for integration? If you can work with a guide, I don't want to say therapist. It doesn't have to be a therapist. It could be anybody that's skilled in guiding who can help you with that process. That's helpful too. Sometimes it's helpful to have that person out there, you know, to work with us. It's helpful. Sometimes we can do it ourselves. And I worked with Edith for many years as my guide also, and you know, she was so skilled at intuition. She could pick up on things that I wasn't even picking up on about myself and my situation, and she could see it many times. So, yeah. So, yeah. Okay. Anybody else? A hand is going up.
What about those of us who aren't very visual?
Yes.
I'm much more kinesthetic.
Yeah.
I've never done well with visual
Yes.
guided
Yes.
meditations.
Yes. Absolutely.
So,
Yep.
what do you
And yeah, you know, and the imagery that you may want to work with is many people find body work very, very helpful. You know, going to a really good body worker who sometimes will do imagery work along with it, or other people, you know, you may have a shamanic guide of some kind who knows how to do the more shamanic kind of pathway. You know, if you trust your guide, whoever that is, whatever tradition that is, I would go to them. So it didn't have to be this process. It could be what they're familiar with too. So there are other techniques of forgiveness. This is one of them. This is the one that I learned that's connected with the psychosynthesis work, and you know, Azioli.